Hello and welcome to Unqualified Advice, an entertaining show for entertainment purposes. Join us as we talk about running our businesses, what we've been learning, and how we're applying lessons from academia and real life as entrepreneurs and investors. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Topics discussed represent opinions represented by parties with different circumstances than your own and should not be taken as advice. Any discussion of securities or other investments should not be relied upon as investment advice. Consult your personal financial advisor and perform your own due diligence. Podcast hosts, guests, and clients of Fig Social Capital may own positions in securities discussed in this podcast. Hey, Sean. You lived through another hurricane.
Hey, Dan. Yeah, managed to not get blown away yet again.
You're tethered nicely to the ground.
Yes. This was, we were just trying to kind of put a number on it. I think the third major one that I've been through, and there was a fourth one that kind of grazed us the first year I was here, and then a couple of tropical storms as well that have come through.
Probably a lot more tropical storms than
it's still not that many more. Maybe 2 or 3.
Surprises me.
Yeah.
Houston in my mind is just like right in line, right? Like maybe after something hits Florida or parts of the Caribbean, it busts up a little bit, but like you're still in line of sight.
They kind of cluster, it seems. Like I feel like years when we get them, we kind of get maybe hit and then we'll get hit by a hurricane, then by a tropical storm the same year frequently. Is what at least that's my impression. I don't actually have any numbers in front of me to justify that. But like this year in end of May, beginning of June, we had what's called a derecho come through, which was like 100 plus mile an hour straight line winds that ripped through the city. And so that took out about 2 million people's power, or 101.7 million people's power earlier this year. And our transmission lines were still all gnarled and garbled from that. So this just hit. We still had, for example, piles of limbs out front from that storm that the city had not gotten around to picking up yet when this one hit. So now the piles are even larger.
Nice. Well, larger and maybe a little scattered.
Yeah. So I'm hoping we don't get another windstorm. And if we get anything, it'll be rain. But rain presents its own, significant issues. But it's been interesting.
In Houston, yeah.
We still have, I had some numbers here just to kind of get some context. There's been a lot of chatter down here about people not happy with CenterPoint, the grid operator, because they're still without power. And as of today, came through Monday? So 5 days. Peak, there were 2.26 million people without power, or 80% of the customers in the area. So today we're down to 680,000 without power. So about 1.6 restored. About 24% of the grid is still down. And that 24% of the grid is obviously very upset right now because it has been over 100 degrees, extremely humid after the rain, and brutal. And so like people have been complaining. There's actually a pretty good image I found. Complaining a lot about CenterPoint's response, and I'm kind of actually somewhat impressed with their response in comparison to previous events. So Ike was one we had hit down here the first year I was here, and it was a category 2. This was a category 1, so it had a little bit higher wind speed,
more power.
I think a couple hundred more thousand people were without power. I think it was around 2.5 million rather than 2.2. It took them a week to restore the first million. This time they had the first million restored within 48 hours.
Wow.
So just for perspective,
that's much better compared to what it used to be then.
Unfortunately, after Ike, it was cool. Like I didn't have power for a week. I was in that it took us a week, I think 8-9 days before we got power, but it hit in September and it wasn't, it was, 75, 80. It wasn't 100. So it massively different circumstances.
Huge difference. Well, I'm glad it sounds like it wasn't. Well, it certainly wasn't as bad as was being predicted. Like what we were reading about Beryl before it hit.
Exactly.
Turned out not nearly as bad. So
I mean.
All right.
Well, it had come in through as a category 5. It started off category 5. This is some graffiti just down the street from us, actually by the bike path. For those listening, it's a very nice font saying "Center Pointless," which amused me. Again,
Yeah,
I think the line operators are
it should be noted that the last two S's in center pointless are $signs.
Oh yes. that's a good note. I forget what I was gonna say now, but yeah.
Sorry, busted you up.
It's
there.
okay. Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say to me, like the linemen with the frequency with which these storms seem to be increasing overall, they've built up a pretty robust network of mobilization of people. Like they brought in 10,000 people, I think, from the area or from the United States into the area within a day or so. Wow. That's just incredible what the IBEW was able to do to get everybody here and all the organizations around it that really did help improve the speed, despite those poor people still that don't have power, that are really still feeling a lot of pain. I think in the wave of all these storms, are linemen going to become the patriotic firefighters of after 9/11 in the near future? I don't know.
Yeah,
not really, but
I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, and I don't know. Just think of all the different professions that get no coverage, get no celebration, nearly no recognition. I mean, some of those occupations like come with the knowledge of you won't be celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking of certain government workers that can't, what they do is dark or can't be told or whatever. I don't know. But then there are these others that are, living right amongst us, doing everyday work that needs done. And without them, you're without AC or without power or whatever. I mean, when we were in Seattle, like ice storms would come through and we'd be without power and without heat.
How long would you be down?
Days.
Days?
I think the longer one was 3.
Okay.
3 or
that's a long time.
I think it was 3 nights, so it felt like 4 days.
Yeah.
With an infant, I'll tell you it is. Yeah. We were all in snowman suits, like inside. And then it's like you can't hardly like make formula. all the things were hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, despite that, out in the terrible weather on roads that were totally treacherous, like they were out restoring power. Like it just took a while to get to us, but it's not like they just sat inside and didn't start working. They were out there doing stuff. So it's amazing.
Yeah, and I heard some people bitching that they saw linemen's trucks all like lined up in a parking lot. Like, why aren't they out there working? Like, well, they might be on a cool down break, probably mandated that they take periodically, or they might be trying to wait for orders. I'm sure there's probably good reasons why they're not out there doing something.
I would hope so.
Yeah, because like they have to
hope it, I mean, approach everything the with cynical caution. Part of it all, right? Like you.
Yeah. I mean, and you have to approach everything with caution when you're dealing with, these power lines. I would think I'm sure there's some pretty strict safety protocols they have to follow and adhere to. So for good reason. So I don't know. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. I think they're doing a pretty dang good job. And thank you if any of you are listening.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever heard of
like a
FEMA's Waffle House Index?
Sorry, there's a delay on our line.
Oh, there is?
The Waffle House? No, I have not.
Okay, so post disasters, FEMA, when they're coming in, will gauge how severe the event was by the number of open Waffle Houses.
Okay.
And so Houstonians being a little frustrated with Centerpoint not getting out updates on who had power, who didn't. I mean, people knew that they didn't, obviously. And trying to figure out what areas of town had power. Houstonians came up with a Whataburger index this week, which we realized when we went into our Whataburger apps and saw that, these ones are open and that's where power is, which you could then use to go find gas stations nearby and such as well.
That is a resourceful way of scouting,
right? Somebody told me they were doing this. I was pretty impressed. I'm like, send me a screenshot of that. That's ingenuity right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
All right. Well, looks like you've got a little bit of a new camera angle going on.
Oh, yeah. Am I moving? I'm sorry.
Fix some things up over there.
Yeah, I changed to I'm trying my iPhone camera just to give it a whirl.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, the Logitech or the
it
one
looks
I
good.
had
Like
been
it was
using.
crystal clear when we started, but now that the delay.
Yeah, I'm on a for what it's worth, I don't have full internet yet. I am on a hotspot. So I'm hoping all the quality is reasonable, but let's not put too much
Well, it'll upload.
Yeah.
It might take a while.
Yeah.
But it's the delay that's real tricky because I start talking and then I realize like you can't hear me. And then we dance around each other.
Not that the video is going to be any faster.
All right, what else is on your mind? What's going on? Well, it doesn't matter about the video. It's even the like you could shut your video off for all I care. Not recording, but yeah. Anyway, yeah. How was your 4th?
The 4th was pretty good. Right in the middle of a week, which is kind of weird to have. Well, I guess no. Wait, was it Thursday? It was Thursday. Yeah. So I ended up having a nice 4-day weekend. Which is always a blessing to just have 4 days to kind of unplug and not have anything in particular to do or anywhere to go. How about yourself?
Yeah, we had an old high school. I mean, him, Anton was in town,
right?
And so we hosted him and had a bunch of neighbors over. I cooked a 16-pound brisket, first time. Did the overnight smoke, and it turned out great. I had a whole party.
Did you use a Texas?
Everyone
crutch?
liked it. I liked it. I thought it came out well. What is a Texas crutch?
Wrapping it when it hits the stall.
Yes, I did.
Okay. That's about the max of my barbecue knowledge on brisket, honestly.
Okay. I watched a lot of YouTube videos trying to figure out like what was going to be my attack method here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I wouldn't have wrapped it, I don't know that I would have hit 202 inside.
Not nearly as quickly.
Well, even then, like we wouldn't have eaten that night. That's how it would have gone. That, or I would have had to crank up the temperature and then had a really crusty outside. Well, anyway, like that was my first brisket. So who am I to talk about? Like, what
hey, yeah, it's been a long time.
But it was hours I left it. I thought, I was like, I don't need to wrap it. I read that you don't have to. And so I was just going for it. And then it was stalled for 5+ hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrapped it and that worked. And we ate that night. Otherwise we wouldn't have.
Yep. I was gonna say a brisket is an undertaking and a commitment because it's just so much food. It's been practical for Jamie and I to ever do. I can't remember the last time I've actually cooked a brisket. What kind of a smoker? Like, was it on a smoker? On what kind of rig would you get yourself set up with?
Well, when we moved in, I bought a Weber Kometo. It is mostly like an insulated version of the classic grill.
Okay.
It's very nice. And I'd only ever grilled on it, but it does have the setup. Like you just kind of move some different shelves around essentially and set it up in the smoker position. And it worked really, really well. Probed great on the inside and then probed the meat on the inside. And I had a little, thing I could monitor on my phone. It's not automatic. It's not like a Traeger or all these other fancy ones. Like if the temperature needs changed, you got to go do it. So I was out there in the middle of the night once. But that, wasn't bad. It was, and it was the, what's it called? Packer cut. It was the full 16. It was the big one.
Nice.
So we still have some tip left and we're going to make chili with it tonight.
Sounds delicious.
It'll be a nice smoky chili. Chili on a 100-degree day though. So
ooh, that's true. That's not the season for that. Yeah.
No, but it's going to taste good. So whatever. Yeah. Otherwise, we're getting off a 2-week trip in the Southeast, the humid, hot Southeast. And it was great. It was part friends, part family, little family reunion on my mom's side. And then we spent a week with the crew that we have at our warehouse in North Carolina. So we did a little beach time out there, did some work, took the team out to dinner.
That sounds nice. So
it was a very nice trip.
Excellent. And kids took everything well. They're probably pros at traveling by now.
You would think, yeah. And they really are. In the grand scheme of things, I think we do really well. That doesn't mean that, like, in the moment, I am totally zened out and happy with how things are going. But yeah, we do okay. And they really are pretty resilient through it all.
Well, that's good for them. Good for you guys, I guess, overall, and the people around you, probably. I'm always
when their brains get fried They don't.
Yeah. You always get nervous on a plane when there's kids. Usually goes really well, though, I got to say. 95 times out of 100.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
There was a particular time that we were on a plane, and I think we were getting a lot of looks. And the kids were fine. It was more about like getting on and people being like, here next to me. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's a red eye, and it's the only available flight. So here we go. A red eye with...
At least they'll be tired.
1-year-old.
Sleep.
They were down for most of it, it worked surprisingly well. But I also feel like it wouldn't take much for it to just not go well. Anyway, on to stuff.
Yeah, on to stuff.
I think we have 2 major topics that we kind of want to go over today, yeah?
I think so. What are they from your perspective?
One being personal boards and one being strategy day.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, that's what I have noted here too. We're in alignment. Wonderful. So yeah, I was thinking a bit about the concept of a personal board this week, as I've had some recent news in my career of getting to be promoted into what's called the quality systems manager role at our plant.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a little apprehensive, but mostly excited, and it's going to be definitely a challenge because it's something new. I've interacted with our quality department many times in different capacities, but they have a side of their job that I've never seen before and that was fairly aloof to until really this week when I started to dig in. But no, I was just thinking about, I kind of was sharing this with somebody I work with that we've talked about the concept of a personal board and how he's this guy I work with kind of become something that's on my personal board. And so I was telling him, about the position. And he's been talking to me about some questions he's had about some just how he's new to the role of the role that I've been in or had been in for 7 years. And he asked me different things about how to think about these trainings and these different programs at work within the context of our role. And I said, hey, one thing that I've kind of adopted over the years is the concept of having a personal board of 2 or 3 people. I have somebody else at work that has been kind of inducted into my board, so to speak, that I said, hey, we'd be somebody that I can rely on. And that people, when you ask them that, are usually very keen to offer their help. And it's nice to be able to have somebody that you can just go to and close the door and say, hey, I need some board time here. It might be about work, or it might be something not about work, or it might be something outside of work in the context of work, or vice versa. But to just be able to have that person that then kind of knows what they're not talking to you, or what with the context in which they are talking to you, and that you're seeking advice and you're being vulnerable and saying, hey, I need help working through some thoughts here. And I don't know,
can you give us an example?
Yeah. So for example, like this role I got, I'd been looking for a move for some time and was at one point displeased with the way the process was going, because it had been 18 months since I was told that I was going to be up for a move of some sort. So it just felt like it was becoming very long, and I was starting to get a little frustrated by the situation. Being able to turn to my the board member at work, so to speak, and just be able to vent those frustrations and express yourself in a vulnerable way to somebody who has an understanding of what it is might be going through, or who has some level that can then bounce ideas back off and forth. You can bounce ideas back off of and can save you from doing really stupid things. It's like, hey, no, calm down, you're overreacting, and helping recenter you, type of thing.
They have context and background and can provide feedback and guidance.
Yes, yeah. Well said in 4 words, 5 words. Much more efficient than me. Dan.
I just wanted to boil it down. No, it's all good. But I guess from a audience standpoint or listener standpoint or something like that, if the idea of a personal board is brand new to you, then there's so many different ways to cut this. So we'll go through a little bit of like what Sean has put together, and then I haven't actually. Will admit that I feel like I have 50% of one, but I haven't actually tried. I didn't put my mind to it. And I think that's going to change. So I'll share kind of how I'm thinking about it. And then some other things where I've had some conversations with others around this idea, and maybe some details that they shared on their perspective and their use or construction of a personal board. But really the idea is to help you. That's the end of it's like, evolutionarily, we all came from villages. We had allies inside our little clan, and you knew who you could turn to get some truth from or some perspective. It's the same idea here. Like, who are you going to pick that you can trust? Who are you already wanting to call around certain subject areas that are happening in your life, right? I think many of us already have those people, or are too afraid to actually make the reach out in order to have that conversation that we so desire. And this just kind of puts a label on the practice, right? So that you can, I don't know, in some way silo your thought process around what this is and how to construct it.
Have you seen?
Yeah,
it's kind of like the Diamond Dogs.
I'm not going to remember the reference.
It's when they all get together and they're kind of talking through like relationship problems. They come in. I think it's like Diamond Dogs Unite or something like that. And
yes,
it's that having that space, the context around that space. Okay, this is what we're talking about now. We're being open about this just for
and we have each other.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's cool. I like that. That was a excellent example from pop culture, which is super, it helps. And it also shows that like these things already exist everywhere, right? Like you might, after thinking about this topic, go like, actually, kind of like how I was saying, it was like, actually, I think I've got like 50% of one, or I'm like 60% of one. I've got something like this, right? And then it's just a matter of like, well, I've got the work pillar, I've got the personal pillar, I don't know, some other pillar in your life, and you've got 2 of the 3 filled out. That's pretty cool. But maybe you should be putting a little bit more forward thought on who you might want to onboard for that other pillar of your life, for their perspective or their excellence or whatever. Right?
Well, the third pillar, you said work pillar, personal pillar. The third pillar being,
I don't know.
I was curious if you had a third pillar in mind. Okay, no, I think that's yeah, very well said. It
depends on how complicated your life are, and it depends on your interests, right? So like, if I were just making one up right here, right now, I've got work, which I feel like is multidisciplinary for me, and then personal, and then I don't know, I might file in fitness or something, right? Turn 40, I hurt my back, it's all messed up now. I'm seeing the chiropractor and getting physical therapy on Thursday next week. Like, clearly I'm not doing something correctly, or I'm chasing something that like it's okay for a 26-year-old but not a 40-year-old dad who doesn't have the time to be like maybe doing the programming that he is. Just stuff like that, right? Like who has already walked that path? Who has walked a path similar to that I hope to be walking? That's maybe 15 years ahead of me, that I could put on the personal board and have that sort of
That's
guidance,
an interesting.
right?
That's an interesting perspective.
Pops in my head.
That's an interesting perspective. I had not really considered the idea of somebody more advanced in age in that regard, but that actually makes some sense. That to have somebody that's maybe been through the path you're not on, but walking alongside, or walking something similar, having some historical
made similar mistakes or knew how to avoid them. Yeah.
I don't know that anybody knows how to avoid them, but at least maybe how to see some of them coming up before they do.
Yeah, exactly. Or just like, listen. Yeah, it's kind of like a cliche, but like listen to your body. And then when you hit this point, dial such and such back, or stop that movement and replace it with this.
Yeah. So one thing
generic fill in the blanks there, but.
Yeah, when I was talking to my buddy at work about the concept, he asked, how would you select people for your board? And I said, one way I kind of thought about it was a Venn diagram of people like on one side that I wanted to root for, and on the other side that I wanted rooting for me. And like, then looking at doing like kind of a personal SWOT analysis and thinking about my strengths and my weaknesses, and trying to select people that I thought had strengths that were different than my own, or what I perceived to be different, and trying to find complements in
complementary.
Complements into that might have a unique, at least hopefully different perspective and different outlook on the problems I wanted to be able to bring to them.
Yeah, I like that a lot. The other one of the conversations I had around this was there were kind of two points that I walked away from this particular conversation. One is no one needs a formal induction onto your personal board. Like, you can do this however you want. They don't actually have to know that they are on your personal board. You don't have to tell anyone. That way, as you change and your life path changes, you can drop people from your board, onboard people from your board, and it's not like, you don't have to have that weird conversation. You're still going to keep in touch with these people, but it's going to be, different as life does its things. And then the other thing that I got from this particular conversation was find at least one person. Hopefully all these people are like this, but like find at least one person who is just really, really good at calling out your bullshit. Because we all do it.
That's
we all
good.
weave our own sort of interpretations and biases and sort of make things fit the way we want to perceive them to be, when in fact they may not be that way. And if there's someone that you know that one has the guts and sort of the fortitude or whatever to call bullshit on you and be like, I think you're lying to yourself right now, sort of message, right? Having that kind of
I love that
skill set on the board is really good.
I think that's something that is hard for people to say to somebody. Like, if you can find somebody that has that ability, then you are okay getting that messaging from them. Ooh, that sounds valuable.
It's super valuable.
Yeah.
Totally. Now, my next question I was going to ask you is like, if you don't necessarily know that person yet in your life or haven't yet identified them, is there a way to cultivate that? Whether it's a new relationship because you see this, you tangentially know this person who like is just really good at telling the truth. They like can't help themselves and you want to onboard them because then they don't really know you that well and it's going to take a long time to sort of build that up. Or find someone who really, really knows you
and just give them
and
explicit
sort of coach
permission
them on
and ask them to try.
Explicit permission.
It's like, I don't know if you're going to feel comfortable doing this, but I'm going to ask you to try, and you have my permission. And if it doesn't go well once, you never have to do it
and
again.
I need it.
But I think I need it. Yeah, because I don't know how you cultivate. There's people I know that have that skill that have to because of just how their roles or careers have evolved, or they're just wired that way.
Yeah, I think it's wiring often. Yeah, naturally disagreeable.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's interesting. So for you, as you're thinking about why you would want a personal board for yourself, what advantages or what benefits are you seeking?
I think the benefits would be, it's kind of, there are many that I think would be possible, if not probable. One is more clarity around my own thinking. I have found that by talking through things, if I had more discipline and wrote, I probably get a lot out of that too. But just through conversation, I'll talk, and then midway through some sentence, I'm like, I found that thing. I found that thing that I've been mad at or whatever, right? That's been bugging me or troubling me or whatever. But just by talking, I found it. Now, I still may need help processing that or finding some sort of solution, but sometimes those realizations don't, I sit in my little box and pretty protected from the world. So it's kind of easy to just like make every day a little bit the same. And I think it's important to get out and, put the egg scrambler in your brain every so often. So this is like one avenue of that. So that's sort of the selfish side or like the me side of it. This is all, you asked me about what benefits I'm searching for.
Yeah,
so it's all going to be me centric, but like I'm sitting here talking about like, I just want someone to be on the other side of the phone and let me talk. That's kind of how I picture myself sounding right now, which is only part of it.
A little, because there's some therapy.
Because at the same time, you're going to get feedback, right? Like,
right?
Yeah. Well, yes, completely. But what is, people are always talking about like, I want to feel seen and heard. There's a lot to that. Like, despite the sort of baggage that's been maybe attached to that or whatever, but like, there's a lot to that. And if you don't feel, I would go further and say like, people need to feel understood.
Yeah.
Which can be hard. But hopefully on your personal board, you have close enough.
Go ahead. Huh? I was going to say, I believe it was Bokonon's 45th Calypso. Tiger got to hunt, bird got to fly, man got to sit and wonder why. Tiger got to eat, bird got to land, right. Man get to sit and tell himself he understand. So that
yeah, but we don't.
Feeling seen and feeling heard and feeling that you've been understood, because I don't think we understand ourselves a lot of times. If you can convince somebody else that somebody else understands you, then you feel, I don't know, a lot sure.
Yeah, completely. Just look at how you finish that sentence. I don't know. I do that kind of stuff all the time. And that's kind of an invitation to, I love this word, but I always mess it up verbally, interlocutor. I should just stop saying it. I like that word. I'll write it, but I can't say it out loud. Anyway, it's kind of an invitation for the person at the other side of the line or the table or whatever. You're seeking feedback with a line that, and I'm sure I've done it on these recordings even. So yeah, that'd be one of the benefits: clarity of thinking, being able to see my own thoughts more clearly. It's feedback, right? Collecting feedback from trusted others that see you, hopefully understand you, and have some perspective on that pillar or that situation, or at least, or maybe your entire life, right? And then what else? Brainstorming is always a big deal. It's hard to do by yourself. Some people are really good at just
you can't yes
siloing
and by
themselves
yourself
and getting it done.
You have to like you cannot yes and by yourself, and like that is to me how you brainstorm is just
it's the two to tango thing.
I mean, you can, but you have to do over the series of several days and get drunk, like writing yourself notes one night. So then you wake up the next day and it's like a different person leaving you a message. And then you go back and it takes a lot longer. It's not efficient.
It takes a lot longer. I think that's a really good point there. That should be noted as one of the hopeful benefits of this, right?
It's like
because you're offloading
scaling
processing onto others. Yeah. It's 2 CPUs instead of 1.
Yeah, hyperthreading. Okay, yeah, I like it.
There we go.
Yeah,
IT background.
Yeah.
So for you've already tried to walk this path. Like you've actually built one,
and I've used it to varying degrees.
Tell us the real benefits. Tell us why you wanted it. Where did the idea for you come from?
So for me, the idea came in business school when I was working on the MBA. I think it was in a case study or an article, some reading assignment that we had where the idea first came across my attention. And I just decided to give it a shot because I thought there was a number of things going on in my life where I was uncertain exactly of the shape of things to come. And I don't know, it's kind of in the pandemic. I think we were all feeling something, right? I think we all had a lot of uncertainty, and we all had a lot of. I think we were all seeking change, looking for ways to remake and rebuild ourselves. And this is a tool I use to help do that. I found that honestly, having I have 3 people in particular.
Or video.
I got you back.
Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. So I ended up putting together 3 people from different areas. Obviously, Dan is one of those, and then a person that I've worked with for I had worked with them for 4 or 5 years at that point, just a couple offices down, which was very handy for proximity for work things. There's something to be said about being able to just walk in and see somebody when something's not going well. And then actually one of my wife's friends who works in public education that has just a very different perspective from myself or the other people that I mentioned on that board to give rounding out in some other areas where I felt unsure of myself. So for me, it's been the times when I've used it and having that, even again, when you're not necessarily saying, hey, this is a person to board conversation, but to be able to like just kind of feel it added a level of, I did tell everybody that was kind of something I was forming and wanted them to play a role on. And sometimes you preface the conversation with, hey, this is kind of a board conversation here. Sometimes it just becomes that. Things just morph into that, as life happens. But it's been very valuable to me when I'm trying to come up with a way to work through a problem I'm having at work or a frustration, something not going well, or also to have somebody to celebrate with, things that you can go and brag to those people because they know how hard you might have been working at something, where bragging to just everybody feels gauche, but having somebody there that is rooting for you is just so critical.
Or having that person that can see those wins when you aren't necessarily seeing them.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
You might feel neutral about it, and then they point out, hey, this is big. This is big. We should, what are you going to do to celebrate this?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And yeah, so celebration is something, I don't know. I like to do it, but also like
you and me both.
But I feel like I don't know. It gives me a lot of angst or guilt or unearned. I feel like maybe it's how much of it's unearned celebration. I don't know.
Is it a Midwest cultural thing?
It might be. It might be just the Indiana in us coming out.
I'm coming closer and closer to deciding that that's my take, at least for myself.
I've had similar thoughts about that. Similar thoughts along the same line. Very much. I've thought it's very much a cultural Midwestern mindset of you get the job done, you do the next thing. You don't need to celebrate somebody for doing their job. It's their job type of thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know that that's the best methodology, but I also struggle with. I have someone in my life who will do that. They will point out the wins as they were, and even when I'm just kind of like blowing past them, I'm like, well, that's done now. Moving on.
Well, that's
and kind of like points the attention back at the thing, and it's like, how would you like to stop and celebrate that? Are you going to recognize that? Like, and just really focus in. I'm like, I always get, that's the part of the conversation where I get dancy, which is if you can get a personal board assembled that like where the other side is asking you questions and you get uncomfortable, something's going well. Is one thing that I would say.
Yeah.
Like you're going to grow through that discomfort because obviously those are questions you're not willing to ask yourself.
And
finding someone who will
eat at you when you don't know how to answer it, but you realize that you should, and then you think about it deeply. And the questions that you don't know how to answer in the moment are sometimes the most valuable in those conversations I've had.
Yeah, sometimes I write the question down because I don't have an answer inside the conversation.
Yeah, interesting.
You just gotta
take it away. Are there any other things you want to?
I think we've painted a good picture of what personal boards can be, what your objectives may be, how you might go about assembling it. To close it off, is there any sort of like tactical advice? Like yours is 2 to 3 people. I mean, I don't know that there's a number here that, I mean, it kind of depends on one, your capacity, and maybe a little bit of your wiring, and also maybe the amount of subject matters you're wanting to bring onto that board.
And and also I think the counterparty's capacity as well. So like the members of the board, like if you need a lot of time, you might need 3-4 people. If you need 20 minutes a week, 2 people might be enough. I don't know. It depends what kind of depth and also being mindful that people are very busy, and it might be, I mean, hopefully these are people that are your friends that you would love to spend the time with you anyway, and you would love to spend the time with, vice versa. But also
hopefully you're learning how to provide value to them too.
Yeah. But it can be hard to make time for people sometimes. Some weeks it's not possible. So
it absolutely can.
So having some, I think at least 2, just so you have a couple of different options
minimum.
Yeah. I think 3-4 is probably adequate. I don't know why you would go personally to want to expand past that. That just, I think, is then becoming something different. And it's not like you ever meet together.
What is that?
Although you could, I don't know.
My life is so remote at this point.
Yeah, it's that's the thing.
It's all here in front of my webcam, unfortunately, and not all of it, but a lot of it.
You digital nomads, or whatever they're called.
We did it to ourselves. Anyway, so the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, like we were texting about a little bit last night, was inside the same conversation. This was with an uncle of mine about the personal board thing, and he had a long, very successful career. So I take his advice with good weight. And one of the things he was telling me was he thinks that it would be good for me, if not necessary for me, to carve out minimum 1 day per month. And he called it Strategy Day. For the audience, I mean, maybe you've heard of like Bill Gates's Think Week, where he's off the grid in a cabin just reading books for a week. Something akin to that is what's being prescribed here. Something where you are not in the day-to-day, you're not looking at email, you're not letting all of the things that, invade your mind and your schedule in. They're not allowed in. And therefore, hopefully creating a little bit more space, right? And I'm going to quickly go back to like what we were texting about, because what I said to Sean last night was like, from my perspective, my first move is because I think this is going to be terribly uncomfortable. Let me preface it with that. I think that day I would feel terribly guilty. I would feel distracted. If anybody has ever, meditated, think back to the first time you ever did it. It's going to be like that. It's going to be so messy. And so you're going to be so self-judgmental about how it's not going the way it ought to go. That's what I think my first strategy day will be like. But therefore, you kind of have to go into it with like a non-judgmental point. Maybe structure it, maybe not structure it. For me, I'm thinking no structure. Just going to spend some time outside. No earbuds, no podcasts, no nothing else in. It's just you and your mind, right? Because how many of us have? Well, I mean, everyone talks or everyone knows the idea of a shower thought, right? When I guess some people listen to music or whatever while they're in their shower, but like most of the time, there's nothing going in. It's just you're taking a shower, and all of a sudden you have shower thoughts. Let your brain do some work. How long's your shower? 15 minutes, maybe 8, 15, maybe
15
if it's
seems
luxurious,
like
it's
the high
longer,
end,
but
right?
it's not. Yeah, it's not long. So like, can you take that energy that is up there in your brain and make it more productive by giving it more space and time to digest, communicate to you? I think that's sort of the point. Well, one, it's a breath of fresh air from the routine of the daily onslaught and knife fight.
Yeah.
But it's also what is there in your own head that you haven't been listening to.
And I'm just trying to think like, yeah, so what would I end up doing? Like, I'm trying to imagine myself in that situation. Yeah. So if you're trying to just clear your head, so the point is, as I understand it, like first off is to get your head just clear and let your brain kind of wander to think of, and with the hopes of coming up with ideas to solve some of the larger problems that have been facing you that it's very hard to focus on when you're fighting the things that are in the tyranny of urgency that are like quadrant 1, like maybe less important but very urgent, when you really need to be having some time for the not urgent but highly important, but because it's not urgent you push it off a lot type of thing. Am I sounding that back correctly?
I think so, but at the same, I would push back a little bit on like, oh, what am I going to do? How's this going to go? Like, I think the point is to come, like, you'll find quicker success if you come into it with no judgment.
Mm-hmm.
No judgment of yourself, no judgment of how the day went, no judgment with, yeah. But then again, it's like this reach for productivity or this reach for an outcome. I think that reach has to be let go of. The outcome needs to find you. It's a little woo-woo.
Okay, I see. I think I see now.
That's how I'm, I haven't done this.
Woo-woo,
so the idea's been introduced to me and I'm going to implement it.
That's an interesting word for it.
I'll report back.
Okay. I think
What would you do?
are times when we've probably done this in our lives and not really thought about, not in exactly the way that you're saying, like putting a label on it and carving out time for it and setting up a framework about letting yourself be okay with it, I think is what's important. Where it might happen in your life accidentally.
Yeah. Letting your team or those around you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I'm out of pocket. You will not be hearing from me until next Tuesday. Adios. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, one, just doing that alone shows trust in those around you, which I think is, from an organizational standpoint, it's great, because so much of a small business owner's time can often be just like being at the ready. I'm here to catch, right, and help. And that's great. And I think that, it's obviously necessary, especially through certain phases of different businesses. But like at the same time, finding people that you can trust is hard. But if you have that, let them know. And how are you going to let them know? One, you can tell them. Two, you can show them, actually place that trust in them.
Yeah.
And then go try to capitalize on that ability by doing something that you probably haven't done in years and years and years.
Yeah, that's true.
It's way lower hanging fruit than a 2 or 3 week vacation, which is also luxurious. But try it out with something that might aid you in your life and your business first, and then as those things are, I don't know. I'm spitballing here about possible future benefits.
I'm trying to think back on the last couple of years in my existence here on this planet, and at the end of the year, I usually end up with a week or two at least of vacation time that I haven't managed to consume, and I'll end up taking every Friday off, or I think this last year I took Thursdays and Fridays off all of December. Like I only worked 3 days a week. It was great. But those Thursdays and Fridays, I just kind of bumble dicked around, for lack of a more appropriate word, and went on bike rides, walked around.
Those can be nice.
Yeah. Just and it was maybe some of that, but I'm gonna try to frame some lines of like actually putting some intentional thought into, hey, using this time to, again, you're not gonna be able to create the thoughts, but to say this time is set aside for that, and to open yourself up to those ideas coming, and maybe making yourself, I don't know, tricking yourself into getting into some sort of flow state to have those thoughts.
Something like that, yeah. And the other thing that I've been thinking about, in fear of it sounding like it's just an excuse to go outside and do no work, it's like, can you structure those sorts of things where it's like you're out doing enjoyable things, but you are alone. You're not, it's like not, I want to say it's not taxing your brain, but like that's not what I mean, right? Like you aren't, it's that flow state, it's that meditative state, it's that mindfulness state. It's like letting the mind do its thing and noticing what's going by, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those blank spaces. And then I'm thinking about like punctuating different time slots, or maybe between activities or whatever, where it's like now you have to sit there with a notepad and write for 30 minutes, just like puke onto the page, get it all out, and then you get to the, if this is a Friday, then on Sunday night or Monday morning, you review everything that came out, and then you will have separated yourself from everything that you've written, and maybe pick out some jewels, or realize like all the things that you're worrying about are like not worth your time, and you should worry about something else, or find something to celebrate. Those sorts of things.
That would be interesting, especially like to then, like, after, let's say you've been facing something that's been causing you anxiety, some problem, and like then once you finally maybe get that problem resolved, and then to go back and look at, say, this is how much I was worrying about that. In the end, it really wasn't that big of a deal, and the solution wasn't that hard. Or just to help have perspective on how much you were worrying about something, and maybe it didn't warrant that level, and help you to better control yourself. And not, not that I think worry is something that people shouldn't do, but to help yourself work through it differently in the future. That's an interesting concept. Let me know if you do that, how that works out. I don't know that I have the discipline myself to do that, because that sounds like a challenge to force yourself to.
I think it will be. Yeah. I'm actually kind of scared of it, to be totally frank. I think many people would hear something like this and go like, well, I'm so lucky, or something like that. And
yeah.
And it's true. I'm not denying that. But I do think doing this and doing it in a way that yields, even though I just said we're not going to try to worry about outcomes, I think it's going to be hard. But I also think it's going to take considerable time. Like, I don't know.
Well,
I'm not expecting anything to like be revolutionary after 3 months.
So are you doing this analog? Are you doing this digital? Do you know yet?
What do you mean by that?
Like, where you're going to be taking these thoughts down? Are you doing that pen and paper? Doing it in like Obsidian or something?
I was thinking pen and paper probably for me. Probably. Yeah. In part because I'm leaning like, this is how I'm thinking about structuring it. Being up early, like at summer sunrise, 5:30 or something like that. Long bike ride. Get in, clean up, get in the car, drive an hour and a half into the mountains, do a lot of walking at elevation with certain breaks, and then come down, drive back, and be home around 4. Help with dinner.
Yeah. I'm eager to hear the outcome once you finally set aside the time.
Yeah. I'm sure there's going to be lots of tweaking along the way. Yeah. Or maybe maybe the point of this is like you're recharging your battery. And I don't know. I keep going back to this, like, don't try for the outcome, right? Like, if maybe it's about just doing things that I have not been giving to myself and not been making the time for.
I like that.
And at the same time, not trying to insert productivity into them. Yeah. Which is what I'm really guilty of, right? Like, I should just go have a walk. I should have a walk because it's a beautiful day. And then I do that and I'm like, oh, I can listen to a podcast at the same time.
Yeah.
And I love those walks. Those are great. I'm not judging those, but I don't think those belong in this particular day. So getting out on the bike and being alone with my thoughts, being out in the mountains, walking around alone with my thoughts.
What about music?
I think, something will come of that. No, I'm thinking it's a no input kind of thing.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking about who did, how many did we did like a 10-day Vipassana retreat. You're not allowed to take reading material or writing material in. It's literally you in a cell, and you can't talk. You're not allowed to talk to anyone. The sexes are separated. They'll come after you if you talk to people. And you can't read and you can't write. Like, you're meditating for a good on 12 hours a day, and then you have 3 meals, so there's 14 hours, and then the other part you're sleeping. And it was surprisingly exhausting. And the only bit of reading material that I was able to sneak in was my travel size Head and Shoulders shampoo bottle. Half of that label was in Thai, and I would sit in my little cell, unable to sleep, just looking at my shampoo bottle, and be like, oh, I wish I could read this. That's how hungry your mind will be for distraction and for somewhere to put its energy and attention towards. And I think my whole point is, like, going back to nomads, right? Like, I'm going to be out walking. It's going to be like we are moving from one campsite to another, and you're just alone with your thoughts. I don't know if I'm doing any of this, or I don't know if I'm thinking about any of this right, but like, this is where I'm starting.
That retreat you just described is blowing my mind. You paid for that, right, Dan? Like that you
It was free.
Huh? Oh, it was? Okay. Yeah.
Anyone in the world can do it. There's one like 20 minutes south of us here in Colorado. I'm sure there's probably more than one near you. Yeah, it's just the official worldwide Vipassana organization. I think we donated. They asked for donations. I mean, they feed you
fair enough.
3 square meals a day. So yeah, we donated, but yeah.
Okay. That.
It should be noted we did this in India.
I quit.
So it was like way different.
Wait, what? Say that again.
You can.
Okay.
You can. We did this in India, outside of Mumbai. I don't know what the percentage would be. Sub 10, but greater than 7 or 8% of my building. And there were probably 100 of us in that building. 50 of us.
Okay.
Man, it's been a few years. Yeah. Anyway, there were several people who quit. Yeah, they disappeared.
Yeah.
One guy in particular, I thought he was just like, I mean, you observe these people. You have nowhere else to put your attention, right? And you're not supposed to be putting your attention to these things, but you can't help it. You just see how restless and crazy, troubled your own mind is. And one of the guys who quit, I was like, man, he looks like he's got it all put together. His posture was great. Didn't seem like he was in pain. I was in so much pain on day 3. You're basically on this crappy little cushion on a concrete floor, sitting cross-legged for
talk about back problems.
12 plus hours a day. Yeah, that's where they started.
Yeah, like, I'm impressed. Kudos to you for doing that. That's an incredible feat. I think I would not be one of the people that made it. That sounds really hard. I'm not gonna lie.
It was, but I would encourage anybody to try.
Yeah,
I really would.
That's fascinating.
I was lucky. I mean, we were unemployed, so we were like, if we're ever going to try this, we're going to try it right now.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I was thinking about that. I think I've been steadily employed for 34 years now, like just without like a gap.
34, 24 or 34?
30. Wait, no, 24. I can't do math. 24. Jesus Christ, I'm not 50.
There we go.
There we go. 24 years. But still, that's 24 years. That's a chunk, you know. Other than the 3 months when I tore my Achilles, and that was like I think the longest I've been maybe not gainfully employed because I was technically on insurance. I don't know, whatever. It's just technicality.
So disability paid out at that point?
Yeah. Short-term disability.
I don't have those kinds of protections. I should probably get some.
Hold on one second. I gotta tend to these dogs. Something's up.
Intruder?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Can never tell with them. Well, so we've talked a good bit about boards, and I think this idea of a strategy day is not something that when you first described it, what you went on in depth today was not how I had it coming into my in my head. So definitely something I need to turn over a lot more in my head, because it's actually an interesting concept, and I've just never thought about it. Like, I'm intrigued. Yeah. I want to know how it goes, and I kind of want to figure out how to try it myself in some way.
Okay, well, hold on. Before we let go of this idea or this thread, one, what did you have going on in your head? Or like, if I told you have to do it tomorrow, gun to your head, what would you do? How would you structure it? Because I don't think there's a right answer here. I think each of us are going to have some other way of
slap the gun in your hand and say it's waiting till fall because it's too hot right now. I do here in Houston. No, I think you're
not going to do laps at the mall.
Well, for me, getting out and hopping on my bike and being, on my bike for a few hours would be an awesome, one thing I really enjoy getting out, biking around the city and exploring things from a perspective I don't get to see nearly as frequently as I like. Honestly, I kind of would want to go walk down, hop on the light rail, and just ride up and down the light rail all through Houston. I don't know, just kind of roam. If I were staying here in town, maybe go to walk through the museums, go to the MFA, walk through the MFA, something like that. Museum of Fine Arts. Yeah, I think it would be like a day of, honestly, like for me, it would be kind of a day of exploring in a way, and trying to go to give myself time to go see things that I like to do and but I just don't do on a regular basis, maybe, and kind of be a tourist in your own mind in your own city.
Yeah, I like that. Tourist in your own city, but therefore tourist of your own mind.
Yeah.
Because really, the goal or what you're trying to reach for is being a tourist of your own. Trying to, I don't know, or at least that's, again, going back, like that's how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
strategy day sounds so like, oh, I'm sitting here in front of a piece of paper and I have to like write down all the new things that we're gonna do. And it's like, well, let's go mining into your brain first. But to do that, you have to set it all, like set and setting matter a lot, and yeah, something like that. I don't know.
The set and setting matters a lot because you are priming the activity that's going to go on your brain. You're priming how you're going to feel. You're priming what you're going to be feeling and thinking, right? So, yeah, that to me seems like it's,
and if you chose some sort of activity where and if you chose some sort of activity that sounded really nice, but really what it did was put you in a place where you're observing people all the time, and then you're judging them a little bit, and then you're worried about that, and you've got to think about the next stop, and you've got to worry about which. It's like, well, your brain is working now rather than you mining it, right? It's kind of like trying to get away from that.
Yeah, I could see that. But like part of it, like, is if you're going to like just riding the light rail without a destination, you don't care where you get off, right? It's like, what's here?
No, I know. I think it'll work. For you, it might work.
Yeah.
Totally. I immediately put myself back on the subway, right? And then I'm like,
that's true.
There's a lot to watch on the subway. There's a lot happening. And sometimes you got to think about safety. And then, someone over the intercom comes over and screams at it. And you can't really understand what they say. And then you find out your train just became an express train. And then you're going to, wait, is your stop an express? It's like, I know that's where my mind would go to while riding the subway. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't work for me. Right, even though I'd want to, I'd be like, "Oh, let's go out to Rockaway, and wander around the
New York
take a long walk on the beach, and then ride back."
Ours is like a model toy train compared to that, so it's much less complicated.
I know. I'm just trying to, I was showing you where, like,
but I do exactly hear what you're
that
saying.
Activity. I'm like, that's the one that wouldn't work for me.
Yeah. I wouldn't. Yeah, and like conversely, I wouldn't necessarily want to go explore a city I didn't know, right? Because then I'd be thinking about the city I didn't know.
I think that's a full onslaught. Yeah.
I want it you got to explore some place you're already familiar with, and I'll be a flaneur as
or something you don't have to learn. Like, flaneur. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually Taleb kind of talks a good bit about that in some of his books. Taking the time to explore and let your mind wander and let solutions come to you. So there's definitely popular literature supporting this concept.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that. Flaneur Day. Maybe that's how I'll put it in my calendar. I like that.
Flaneur Day. Okay. Well, I am really excited to hear how it turns out for you if you do it. If I set aside some time for myself to do it, it probably will not be until fall, because frankly, this sounds like something you want to be able to be outside and enjoy some outside time with, like not just locked inside of a room in air conditioning. But I'm excited.
I don't know, maybe like during those inside days, like it is for me right now. You take Bill Gates example, and it's just like, I've got 3 books behind me. Let's see how far I can get through them.
That's true.
You're not going to be mining your subconscious or anything like that, but like if it can be a purposeful read, right, that informs something.
That's true.
That you otherwise wouldn't have gotten through. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the act of setting aside time for something that you wouldn't normally set aside time for. That's part of the ritual and the magic.
It's the intentionality. It's the ritual intentionality. Yeah. Why?
Because like is it the left-hand path and the right-hand path of magic? It's this whole thing that I don't know anything about, but basically the idea of mantras, I think, kind of comes from there, of these rituals of saying this will happen,
like
this will
mantras.
happen, this will happen, putting it out in the universe. So like so the like setting aside the time for which something you wouldn't normally do, part of that ritual is part of the, I don't know which path, right hand, left hand. It's all made up anyway, but now I gotta look it up.
I was gonna say I'm writing it down so that I'm gonna look at that when the kids are asleep.
Aleister Crowley, I think, is like the guy who wrote a lot about it. Like it was like it was born out of a lot of LSD and mushrooms, probably at one point.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like research is all over the place or whatever, but it seems like more connections in your brain are made after going on those things. So who knows?
Yeah,
who might argue?
Yeah, there's so much of the time when I think we let ourselves dwell in kind of the rear hemispheres of our brain, the rear hemisphere of our brain, which is fine and all, but like there's a lot of magic that happens when you're up there thinking in the front hemisphere, and that's one I want to reread is Master's Emissary. I feel like I need to go back to that here soon. Sorry, that just came out of nowhere. But I've been thinking a lot about just how to think lately, and I really want to go back and reread some of how it works, mechanically within the gray matter, so to speak. It was fascinating information. I felt like I was learning a ton when I was going through it. Now I don't remember a bit of it.
Well, it's pretty dense, that book, yeah.
Yes, it's dense. It's dense.
And it's not a dense 100 pages. It's a dense like
500-600. Yeah, I have not had the guts to pick up, even like look at the second one yet, and I think it's like 2 volumes. It's not the second one, but it's the most recent one, which is The Matter with Things. I think
The Matter with
Tom
Things.
Morgan like just raves about, but I don't think I have the fortitude quite yet. Though maybe someday.
Have you ever read any of Vaclav Smil's books?
No. Smirl.
Vaclav. Last name Smil, Smil.
Smil. I heard Smurl.
The book that I want to read is How the World Really Works. Anyway, so
I've seen this title floating around. Okay, I might check that out. Let me know if you end up going on and pulling the trigger on that. I might join you with a read along.
Yeah. Should we read books? Are there any that are on your docket right now?
I am just coming to the end of $1 Trillion Triage. Highly recommend it to anybody who is interested in knowing more about the Fed. There's the first, 20% of it is kind of a light overview, historical overview of key events from its inception to Trump entering office and the pandemic. And then it's really heavily involved in everything that they had to do and all the red lines they had to cross and the rules that they weren't sure if were rules or not that they had to break to basically keep the system from completely melting down, grinding to a halt, and just pure catastrophe from the world economy just ceasing to exist for a period of months, essentially, which it's really wild. Like, and of course it's through the author Nick Timarosa's lens, and he's going from interviews and information he can find, and who knows how true all of it is, but it's really pretty amazing how close we came to things just blowing up in a way on the financial side that it would have been recession-like, Great Recession-like, if not worse. It's amazing that what we've done worked, and it's honestly, for all the bitching we did about inflation, I think if that was the bill we paid for the actions that were taken then to prevent a lot more ruin, I think we're all pretty happy with it. That's what I've been consuming in terms of books, but I'm looking forward to a new one here soon. So how about yourself? Anything you'd recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend, there's 2 that three. Since I was traveling, I went to Kindle. So now I've got like 3, one in Audible, one on paper, one on my Kindle. This is how I operate. And so I'm maybe halfway through 2 of these, and then I'll probably finish the other one tomorrow or Monday. The Looming Tower by Lawrence Wright. The subtitle is Al Qaeda and the Road to 9/11.
Ooh,
it's crazy detailed and fascinating and written so well. It's almost like a thriller in terms of like you following the people and figuring stuff out as you go, and learning what the government does and doesn't know, and where the long histories of all the different people involved. And I mean long histories. It's really painting like all the different relationships and powers and groups and cultures that all sort of coagulated into.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm halfway through, so
that's a deep, dense
it won a
topic. I would
Pulitzer.
think.
Yeah, totally. It won a Pulitzer Prize, and I mean, being halfway through it, I'm going to say I think it was deserved. Okay. So then the other one that I started reading on my Kindle because we were traveling is, let me get the real title. The Tiger, A True Story of Vengeance and Survival by John Valiant, or Vaillant. I don't know how to say his name. Anyway, Far East Russia, pretty expansive in terms of like area covered in terms of time. He'll have things that have, he'll write about things that had happened in the 1850s and then all the way up to like 2007 or something like that. Tiger conservation in the Far East of Russia in Soviet times, after Perestroika, and how all these things sort of change. There are indigenous people in the Far East, just like Native Americans here, and then the Russians were the colonists or pioneers or whatever you want to call them, and sort of like the culture clashes there, the changing of Russians as they move from European Russian. I forget the word. There's a Russian word for the people who live out in the Far East, have chosen to live out in the Far East. So anyway, I don't know. It's you learn a lot about the tiger, the Amur tiger, which we refer to as the Siberian tiger. I don't know. I've just found it really entertaining, and also like it's true, but it's all like out of this world for me, right? And then the one I'm listening to that I'm almost done with, and then I'll get off my box, is I started listening to Madeleine Albright's Hell and Other Destinations, and it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, I think she's a brilliant
memoir.
person.
Is it like a memoir?
No, she wrote a memoir, and then I can't tell you how many other books she wrote. There are two that are on my map that are ones she wrote after her memoir. So this is one of them. And then she wrote another book called Fascism that I would like to read because that's such a trigger word for so many people. And she kind of really spends time diving into a more real definition and stuff. And so I would like to read it. But Hell and Other Destinations it reads a bit like a memoir at times. Like she really accounts stories, and you feel like you get to rub shoulders with Colin Powell in the book and Condi Rice, and I don't know, all these different players and how they sort of come through Albright's life. But I've loved the book. It's been super entertaining, and I feel like I've learned stuff. I don't know. This is probably a book that's a little bit more confirmation bias for me because I agree with her on a lot of world policy and stuff. But she paints that picture too. She paints her in her own opinions around things that she's far left office, and how she might have approached things differently, or why she would have been. I think the more interesting parts are when she's explaining why she would have approached things differently. She clearly has a very deep knowledge of different machinations of relationships in the world.
Okay, that sounds interesting. I pulled it up, and I have the title here in front of me. I might have to put this one on my queue. It looks like it's some interesting stories. And I mean, anybody at that level of government, if you're talking about a cabinet position, they're going to have some stuff to say. That's got to be pretty interesting. If you have a base interest in some of the topics, I think you'll probably get a lot out of books like this in general. I'm finding at least the closer as I get more entrenched in the middle age, at least, maybe.
Yeah, I think that is part of it, yeah. Seeking adventure through books.
Yes, indeed. Well, Dan, I think this has been an interesting little discussion on some things that I hope people who are facing, career changes, or perhaps, owning a small business and maybe having some difficulties with framing their thoughts and finding support structures. Maybe today's topics gave them some ideas on ways to help themselves. I think for at least myself, I definitely would sing the praises of what we were speaking about here today on the board side, at least. And I very much am looking forward to taking a strategy day or two and thinking about what that's going to look like. I think that's worth a shot. Everything's worth at least trying once, right? And worst case is it doesn't work out so well, but I think that's the
at least
thing
trying
also,
once.
Some reps feel like it would.
I think reps are important on this one. I really feel like, I think the way I put it to you last night was like, I think I'm just going to be out there and realize like, oh, the wave just went by. Oh, there was another wave. well, maybe I can catch a wave, maybe I can paddle, and then a few weeks go by, or a couple months go by, whatever it is, and I'm gonna be like, I finally got on one wave. I still crashed, but like I caught it, and I think next time will be my time, kind of thing, right? Like I think it's gonna take some reps or some practice to really feel. I mean, partly because you might be changing your methodologies or strategies around strategy day, but yeah, it's gonna take some reps. But yeah, wonderful conversation. I hope some of these ideas become valuable to someone. I think the personal board idea, like it almost doesn't matter what you're doing with your life. You may be just starting your life as an adult. Maybe you're even in college. It doesn't matter. I think the personal board idea could really be stretched out into just about any station in life. Unless you're, on the senior end of it and you're looking to give back, then like maybe your mission is to, maybe it's a bit like what my uncle's doing or something like that, like expressing these ideas or wishes upon people who you think might find them valuable, right? So anyway, if your frontal lobe is nearing maturity onward, I think you could just probably get value out of personal board.
I'll keep that in mind if I go back to McGilchrist, the Master's Emissary, as I'm studying the frontal lobe, and report back my findings.
Tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah, totally. All right. Well, it's always good seeing you, Sean.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody for tuning in. You can, as always, find us here wherever your favorite podcatcher is, but also on x.com. At Slow VSM for myself, and at Daniel Hatke for Dan. Did I just say that right? Right?
Yeah.
It's Daniel Hatke? Yeah. Okay. All of a sudden I got panicked that I had your name wrong in Twitter land.
Yeah.
And please,
if
you've been listening to the show, we appreciate it. Please like and subscribe where appropriate. It does help generate other interest. Our numbers are small, but slowly trending up a little bit. I've noticed. So we're gonna keep plugging away here, doing it for the love of it. But if you are getting value out of this, please be sure to tell a friend.
Give it a share. Yeah. Consistency is key. See y'all later.
Adios.